Yes, welcome back to Too Young To Grieve. And today's episode is one that I've wanted to record for a little while now because if you've lost someone, you'll know this one and exactly what I'm going to talk about in today's episode. And we're talking about advice. The stuff people say to you after loss, some of it helps and some of it just doesn't. And the weird part about this is that most people mean well. They're not trying to upset you. They're just trying to fix something that they don't understand, and when someone you love does die, people suddenly get very uncomfortable with silence. Don't get me wrong, some people will just stay silent, they won't say anything. But some people get uncomfortable with that. So what they do is they try and fill it. Sometimes with kindness, sometimes with, the cliches that we've probably all heard. But today, I just want to be honest about the best and the worst advice that I've heard since losing my dad. Not to criticize anyone at all, just to talk about what actually helped and also what made things a little bit harder for me at the time. So that if you do hear some of these things, you can sort of understand where people are coming from and potentially a better version from what I'm going to tell you today. But what I want to make clear is that when I say some of it didn't help, it's not by the fault of the person. It's just that as someone who hadn't gone through grief, they just don't know what to say and what is the right thing to say. And if you take a step back and you think from your perspective before you experienced grief, you probably wouldn't have known either. So just bear that in mind. Someone is just trying to help you. They're just not too sure what to say. So hopefully after this episode, if you're someone listening who is going through grief, you have a bit more understanding of the best and the worst advice that I've heard and things that can help you. And if you're someone who isn't going through grief, but is just listening out of curiosity, or maybe is listening because they know someone going through grief and want to get a bit more understanding, hopefully you'll have a bit more understanding of the best and worst advice. And this is, again, just honest opinions from myself, and hopefully you agree with most of it, you can disagree with some of it, and I always like to get feedback from yourselves as well. So feel free to comment or feel free to drop me a message or the Too Young To Grieve pages a message. But without further ado, enough of my waffle, let's get into this. So why does advice in grief feel different? Well, one thing that I realised pretty quickly after loss is that grief changes the way that words land. For me, before grief, words were just, thrown about. I didn't really think about what I was saying, didn't really think too much about what other people were saying. Things I normally shrug off suddenly felt a bit heavier. Comments that were meant to help felt a bit more irritating. And some well meant phrases literally just stung out of nowhere. Things that I'd probably heard before just didn't feel right anymore. Because what happens is when you're grieving, you're already obviously holding quite a lot emotionally. So when someone says something that sort of misses the mark, it's not just that one sentence or that one phrase, but it's everything else coming up that you're already carrying underneath it. And when you're young, and obviously this podcast and Too Young To Grieve is related specifically to young people, but it does relate to anyone who is grieving. But when you're young, it does hit a little bit harder because most people your age haven't experienced this yet. So they don't know what to say. So what they'll do is they'll copy things that they've heard before or reach for something that sounds comforting to them but might not necessarily apply to grief. And if you've ever walked away as someone who's grieving from a conversation thinking, look, I know that person loves me, I know they're just trying to help, but honestly, that just didn't help at all, then that is completely normal. And I want you to understand it doesn't make you ungrateful, but it just makes you human. And when you're grieving, there are some things that do just not hit right at all. So understand that that's normal, it's part of the grieving process. You are human, and it's okay to feel that way sometimes. So let's start with some of the worst advice that I've heard from my grief journey, and I'm sure that a few of you will be able to relate to this. And if you're new to your grief journey, you might not have heard these yet, but if you do, here's just a little heads up and a little bit of a reason why they're potentially not the greatest advice, in my opinion. And a lot of other people that I've discussed this with do agree as well. So it's not just me. But number one, it gets better with time. Now, this sounds great, but people say this with such certainty. Like, time is going to just come in, clean everything up, rearrange your heart, leave you feeling brand new and back to normal. But when you're at the start, time doesn't feel helpful, and this phrase doesn't feel helpful because time feels slow. It feels endless. It feels like something you're just sort of surviving at the start. You feel numb and you feel like you're just going through the motions, going through each day. So when someone tells you that it gets better and it's a bit too early on in your journey, sometimes what it sounds like is, why aren't you better yet, mate? Because you're like, well, if it gets better with time, why don't I feel better yet? It's been a month now. But with grief, there is no timeline. So when someone says that to you, you sort of question yourself and you're like, well, surely I should feel better now then, if that's what they're saying. But what I want you to understand is that for me, it didn't get better with time. It got different. And what I mean by that is the pain didn't disappear. It just changed. And that's what happens with grief. It never disappears. It changes shape. It softens. It doesn't feel as heavy. It became something that I could carry instead of something that constantly crushed me. And I recently posted a video talking about the ball and the box theory. So let me just touch upon that quickly because this will help you understand it. With time, things don't get better. They just get easier to carry and you get stronger. And what the ball and the box theory says is there's a box which is life and there's a ball which is grief. And in that box, there's a pain button. And what happens is at the start, that ball of grief is so big that in the box of life, it constantly hits that pain button. And when it's constantly hitting that, whether it's a memory, a song, a photo, whatever it is, it's constantly hitting that pain button. And the ball of grief feels so heavy and you can't escape it. And that's the start of your grief journey. But over time, the box stays the same, but the ball shrinks. So what that means is it doesn't hit that pain button as often. It's still there. That ball of grief is still there, so it will hit that pain button at some point throughout your life because it never fully goes away, but it won't happen as often. So that's what you can take from it getting better with time, is that you just won't feel it as often. When you do, don't get me wrong, it still hurts, but it won't happen as often and you'll get stronger for it and you can build that new life around grief. So look, time doesn't erase the loss, but it teaches you how to exist alongside it. You learn how to live alongside grief. And that's what I wish people said instead. Time doesn't erase the loss, but it teaches you how to live and exist alongside it. The second one, you'll move on eventually. So this one never really sat right with me at all because it makes love sound like it's disposable. Like the connection, the love that you had with that person that you've lost. You'll just close that chapter and start another one, and you'll eventually just forget about them. You'll just move on. But you don't move on from people who mattered. You move forward with them. So they don't just stay in the past, you just forget about it. You just move on. Like who even was that person? They don't just stay in the past. They come with you into the future. And what I mean by that is you'll carry on their legacy in your choices, in your values, the way that you love, the way that you live, the way that you show people that kindness does still exist, even after you've experienced such a loss and pain. Nothing about real love ever ends. That's something that you need to understand. It just changes shape, how that shows up. So, yeah, you'll move on eventually. It never sat right with me because you can't just dispose of love. It just changes how it shows up in your life. That's what happens. So you'll move forward with them in your life, just in a different way. The third one is something that a lot of people said to me at the start, and that was stay busy so that you don't think about it. And I completely get why people say this, and I think it is good to an extent. And the people probably think they're helping you cope, but what this sort of really does is teaches you to avoid your feelings. And I realised that when I was staying busy, when I was doing things, when I was running, doing high rocks, starting social media, for example, what I was doing is I was keeping busy, but I was just pushing those feelings that I had of grief and keeping them inside. So staying busy doesn't heal you. What it does is it distracts you. And distractions will always wear off because you can't constantly be running, creating things, doing things to distract yourself. You can't. So what you need to learn is, when you're not busy, how can I deal with this grief? So when those distractions do wear off, then all the feelings you avoided will come back. And that's happened to me. I've noticed it over the years that through avoiding it, staying busy, it's never fully been worked on. And those feelings have never fully been addressed. And I've worked on them more recently. And it helps massively when you don't just stay busy and avoid it, and you understand it better. You understand yourself better, your grief better, and how you can build a life around it. So grief doesn't disappear because you're busy. What it does is it just waits until you're quiet again. So, 2 a.m. when you're finally alone and you start thinking about it. When you're on a car drive and you start thinking about it. And avoiding emotions doesn't make you strong, but what does is actually facing them and understanding them. So, yeah, staying busy can help, but it shouldn't be something that you just do to avoid the grief. And over time, definitely working on and understanding that will help you more than staying busy will. The fourth one that I'm really not a fan of is you'll be yourself again soon. And why I'm not a fan of this is because this one sounds comforting. It does. But what it assumes is that you're broken and that the goal is to go back to who you were. Now, you are not broken. You're just grieving. And the truth is, grief does change you. It does. I've had this conversation today. It changes you. And you don't go back to yourself as such. What you do is you grow forward and you become the new version of you after grief. And it's not a worse version. It's not a better version. It's just a different version. Different priorities, different boundaries, different depth, different understanding, different perspectives. And that's not failure. That's what happens when your life shifts in such a big way. So, no, you won't be yourself again soon, but you'll be a new version, a different version, a changed version. And you know what? Sometimes it can actually be a good thing for some people. Some people become more confident, do things they didn't do before, have new perspectives that allow them to be happier. So, it's not a good thing. Grief is never a good thing. But you change, you become different. There's a new life after grief. But you can still build a good life after grief. So remember that. And the fifth one is you'll forget the pain eventually. You won't. You won't forget the pain of loss. You won't forget the pain of losing that person. You'll remember it for as long as you can live, really. But it won't always hurt like it does, especially at the start. The pain won't stop existing, but it does stop controlling you and your life. Some days you'll hardly notice it. Some days it'll be very heavy and sit right next to you. And both are completely normal, because forgetting was never the goal with grief. The goal with grief is learning how to carry the pain without it owning you, without it controlling your life, and still living and moving forward. That's healing. Forgetting the pain isn't. Number 6 is one that we all hear. Be strong. This one gets thrown around so easily. Like strength is just being silent, pretending, never breaking. But you know what? Real strength looks like crying. It looks like asking for help, admitting you're not okay, getting through the day anyway, just by showing up as best as you can. Strength isn't necessarily impressive to some people. It can be quite quiet, quite lonely. It can be survival in ordinary moments for other people. But you surviving and showing up every single day, that's strength. Just trying to do things every day and show up for those that are still here and yourself and make the person that you've lost proud, that's strength. So being strong when you're going through a healing journey isn't really what people think it is and what people say and mean when they say be strong. And now the last bit of advice that I've heard that I don't really like is at least they're at peace. Okay, I get it. I understand what people mean. But peace somewhere else doesn't replace the emptiness that is here. And sometimes the only thing that you can really say back to that is, I get it, but I just miss them. And that's fine. So, yeah, those are 7 things that I've heard that I don't really like. And yeah, isn't the best advice that I would say when it comes to grief. Now, it wouldn't be right for me to say these things as the worst piece of advice, but not give people who potentially haven't been through grief things to say instead. Because some people listening to this, like I say, might not be going through grief, might be listening to help their friends or family out. So what I wish people said instead is, okay, I don't know what to say, but I'm always here for you. That is one of the single best things you can say to someone grieving. Another thing you can say is, you don't have to be okay for me. That makes people think, you know what? I'm not okay. I'm not going to pretend to be okay for them because they've told me that I don't have to be okay for them, and I can tell them that I'm not feeling my best, to be honest. Another thing you can say is, this sounds really hard. Grief is hard, as simple as that. And you just saying it does sound really hard is just acknowledging the fact of the matter is it is hard. Another few things to say is, I haven't forgotten, because people do forget. You know, a couple months goes past and you don't hear from some people, but you saying I haven't forgotten really lets the person know that you are still thinking about them and you're always still there for them. That leads on to the next thing you could say, I'm thinking of you. Just knowing that that person is thinking of you gives a lot of peace to the person, because they know they are thinking about me. I haven't been forgotten. I am feeling things and it's normal because they're thinking about me. Something must be slightly different here. But also know that they're thinking of you gives them the opportunity to drop them a message and say, look, I know you said you haven't forgotten you were thinking about me, and yeah, I'm struggling at the moment. Would we be able to grab a coffee or something like that? And that leads on to the last one, is just saying, I'll sit with you. You know, I'll sit with you. You don't have to speak. I'll just be there for you. I'll sit with you. We'll go for a coffee. We'll go for a walk, whatever it is. But saying I'll sit with you allows the person who's grieving to understand, yeah, they're actually there for me and they're willing to just sit through it with me, even if it's nothing crazy. Because grief doesn't need solutions. It just needs presence. It just needs human connection. It needs people who stay, not people who try to fix with what they say. And some of the things that I mentioned before are, you know, people trying to fix it, and you don't need to fix it. All you need to do is say that you're there for them and you're there, whatever, your presence, and you'll stay. That's all it needs. So let's move on to the good advice that I've heard, because there is a lot of good advice that I've heard, and it's helped me massively on my grief journey, and that's a lot of the reason behind this podcast and this page. Too Young to Grieve is something that I created to allow you to understand grief better and to know that it is going to be okay. And it does. Yeah, it does get better with time, but in a different way, and in a grief kind of way. So here's the best advice that I've been given. So let's run through it. The best advice that I've heard is, there's no timeline for grief. This honestly lifted so much pressure off me, because it took away deadlines, took away a schedule. No, you should be okay by now. You know, healing doesn't run on a clock. It happens when it's ready and when it's going to happen. It happens on your own timeline, because everybody grieves differently. And there is no set timeline. There's no set rules. You know I've heard about stages of grief and this and that, and there's no timeline for those stages. You might not even experience those stages. Everybody grieves differently. Everybody grieves on a different timeline. And whatever happens, however long it happens, however long it takes to feel a little bit more like you, it will take as long as it needs to take. There is no timeline, so remember that. The second one is that As the main man, Dean Lewis, made a song on, grief comes in waves. It does. Some days you'll feel okay, some days you'll feel like you've gone backwards. But nothing's wrong at all with you. Grief is not a straight line. It ebbs and flows, it moves in circles, it goes one direction to the next, like you don't even know. And what I want to say is that if you do feel like you've gone backwards, or you do have a rough day or a rough week or a rough month even, it doesn't mean you're failing. All it means is you are human and you are grieving. And that's how grief works. It does. It comes in waves. And all you've got to do is just ride that wave as best as you can. Just keep showing up as best as you can. Because there'll be some days where you feel brilliant and some days where you don't. And that's absolutely fine. That's part of the grief process. The third one that I love to hear is, nothing is wrong with you. And that is so true. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Grief messes with a lot of things. It messes with your motivation, your confidence, your energy. And you start to think, well, is this just who I am now? Like, I just feel numb. I feel like I'm not going to go back to the person I was. I feel like I'm not going to be able to ever live like I was before. And no, the answer is no. It's not just who you are now. You're just tired. Your nervous system is tired. Grief impacts you physically as well. And you are not broken. You're just adjusting to a world that changed without any warning for you. Grief and loss can come out of absolutely nowhere. And if it's the first time you're experiencing it, you won't know how to deal with it at first. But nothing is wrong with you. If you're feeling a certain type of way, if you're thinking certain things, if your emotions are all over the place, if you're angry, if you're tired, you're confused, you're struggling, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just grief. And that's what happens in grief, unfortunately. But you are way stronger than you think. And all you need to do is just keep going. As best as you can, keep going, because you're going to be okay. You are. You are going to be okay. Remember that. And nothing is wrong with you. You're just grieving. You're human. Number 4, one of the best advice I've heard, is let yourself feel it. And this relates to the other one about keeping busy. Let yourself feel it. You don't have to drown in your grief. You don't have to make it your personality. You don't have to constantly talk about it. You don't have to force it all out. But don't bury it either. Emotions don't disappear when they're ignored. All they do is just wait until there's space. And that's what I mean about keeping busy. If you stay busy the whole time, it's fine. But it will catch up and the emotions will come out at some point, whether it's after a month or whether it's after 2 years. It will come out eventually. Feeling is part of healing. Remember that. Let yourself feel whatever it is that you're feeling. If you're feeling angry, feel it. If you're feeling okay, feel it. But whatever it is that you feel, let yourself feel it. Number 5, one of the best advice I heard, is you don't move on, you move forward. And this one stuck with me. Look, I didn't leave my dad behind. No one leaves anyone they've lost behind. What you do is carry them into everything that you do. A lot of the things I do, I carry my dad into everything I do. Grief doesn't remove people from your life. It teaches you how to love them differently and carry them through the rest of your life. They will always be with you, always be watching over you and supporting you along their journey and your journey, even if it doesn't feel like it. But I saw something recently and it made me think exactly as this does. And it's when you actually see them again or meet them again, when the day comes, you might go to them and you might say, I've got so much to tell you. There's so much has happened since you've been gone and I need to tell you about it. And then they'll turn to you and they'll say, I know. I've been there with you the whole time. And that just really made me feel good. Because you're not moving on, you're just moving forward with them in your life in a different way. Number 6, everyone grieves in their own way. That's one thing I really want you to understand. Comparison is the thief of joy with absolutely anything, and the same with grief. Comparison makes grief worse. If you're comparing to other people who are grieving and you feel like they're way ahead of you in their journey, there's no right amount of tears, no right timeline, no right way to cope, just literally your way. And whatever that looks like, it's fine. You're grieving in your own way, and whatever works for you, and however you feel, however long it's taken you, that's fine. It's your way, and that's how you're grieving, and that's absolutely fine. Remember that. And I want to finish on one thing that someone said to me before, when I was at probably my lowest point, and thinking that, yeah, he is gone. What am I going to do now? How am I going to get back to where I was? How am I going to make decisions, do things, carry on with my life without him? But you know what? Number 7 is, your life can still be beautiful. You do realise that, right? Although you're grieving, although you're feeling like it can't be, your life can still be beautiful. And this one was hard to believe at first, and it might be for you guys listening right now, but it's true. Grief changes the shape of your life, it does, but not its value. And different, the life after grief, doesn't mean worse. Joy doesn't disrespect the person that you lost, it honours them. And look, if you go on and you keep going and you have an enjoyable, happy life, that doesn't mean you're disrespecting the person that you lost. It means you're continuing their legacy. You're making them proud. You're living the rest of their life through yours. And that life can be beautiful. You can go on to do brilliant things and make them so proud. Your life can still be beautiful. Remember that. So I want to close this episode out by saying, if this episode made you feel understood, I'm glad. Because honestly, that's the point of Too Young to Grieve. As young people grieving, we are often misunderstood. We are often told things because people don't necessarily know what to say. And if you've ever been hurt by something someone said, or helped by something unexpectedly simple, then that is grief. And I hope that this has helped you understand that. It changes the way that words land, and you get to decide what advice that you want to keep and what you want to let go. Because no one else gets to define your grief apart from you. Remember that. So thank you so much for listening. As always, I appreciate all the support. If you want to share this on your stories, on any platforms, feel free to tag myself and the Too Young to Grieve pages. And if you're not following already, then feel free to follow myself at Alfano 11 and at Too Young to Grieve. If you found this helpful, please follow the podcast, comment below what you found the most useful, anything you want to hear me discuss a bit more. But remember, you don't have to carry this alone. Keep going. You're way stronger than you think, and you're going to be okay. I'll see you next week.